Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode here at Catholic Table Talk Podcast. This is the podcast where everything Catholic is on the table. Thank you again for joining us on another great week here at the table. If you have a show topic request, please email us them at catholictt@gmail.com. Again, it's catholictt@gmail.com for a show and speaker requests. We always love to hear from you. I always try to make this show more about, how can we help best serve you? So get them into us. Also, like, comment, subscribe on all of the platforms that we're on. Try and do something on each, try and do stuff a little different on each platform. So make sure you follow us on every platform and share the show with a friend. I mean, who knows if they're Catholic or not Catholic? It's great Catholicism fact that we share, so share it with a friend. So today's show, episode 102, we have a very great show in store for you. A couple episodes ago for episode 100, I kind of dove a little bit into the Eucharistic revival going on right now. About ways to switch gears into the parish year, but we're going to talk about how can the Eucharist save civilization. We'll have a very special guest making his Catholic Table Talk debut, and Dr. Jerry Staudt. There's a little bit about Dr. Staudt here. Specializes in seminaric theology. He is into Catholic education, church history, and Thomas Aquinas. Just to kind of a little bit more about him, he has kind of taught he has taught at Aquinas Institution since 2009, teaching part-time since 2014. He served as director of Catholic Studies program at the University of Mary. He has wonderful, great books. So please listen closely. The priority of God, recovering the virtual religion's role in Catholic theology. Also, the beer option, brewing a Catholic culture yesterday and today, and many more. We'll kind of dive a little bit more into at the end. But with that being said, let's welcome to the table Dr. Jerry Staudt. So, Doctor, thank you again for taking the time today out of your busy life to come on the show.
Absolutely. Great to be with you.
Awesome. And just for the audience to know, I mean, you make appearances on radio shows before. That's where I ran across you. And listen, folks, I mean, when I'm sitting down trying to do homework and he's on talking about the Eucharist and I have to stop and just listen to him and forget about homework, it's very special. So you might want to make sure you're paying close attention to this and whatever you're doing if you're driving or something. So with that being said, we kind of dive right into it, what we want to talk about. And like I mentioned, we're in the Eucharistic revival. You know, people say, I don't really believe in the Eucharist. I believe it's Jesus Christ. There was a survey, now this is getting to be maybe a little older survey, but a survey of more than 60% of Catholics don't believe that Jesus is fully present in the Eucharist, and that's Catholics. That's not non-Catholics. That's not 60%. Over 60% of Catholics don't believe in the Eucharist. So how can it save civilization?
Well, first it has to save us.
Right. Absolutely.
And so, yeah, there is, there's a lot of challenges right now. And so if we don't believe in the Eucharist and we're not living in accord with the Eucharist, then I don't think the Eucharist will save civilization. But the thing
Right.
is that God ultimately, he didn't come into the world to save the world itself. He came into the world to transform us from within. And so the Eucharist is really reclaiming our lives for God, transforming us from the inside out into the image of Christ in the world. But the more that we work with that grace, the more that we allow that grace to take root in us, it naturally will begin to change the world. And so the Eucharist is leaven. And as it grows in us, it does grow out into the world. And this has happened before, right? When civilization collapsed, in Western Europe after the fall of the Roman Empire. The Eucharist really was the center of the rebuild around in the monasteries, the great cathedrals that were built up in Western Europe. All the art and culture that we love in the West was centered around the Eucharist. So the Eucharist rebuilt civilization once, and absolutely it can do it again. There's nothing more powerful in the world than the Eucharist.
Exactly. It's basically almost kind of the center of the, people ask why you're the Catholic. I mean, it's the Eucharist, and I mean, basically that's at least what I go to. I mean, it's the Eucharist. And I know of people who have joined the Catholic Church because of the Eucharist. So yeah, really great stuff. And I like how you're saying if you have that grace, it just naturally grows and it can change the world. I mean, like I said, I know there's a large number of actual Catholics that don't believe that it is truly Jesus. But if we can kind of shrink that number down and truly believe and truly work with with that grace, I mean, Catholics still lead, I mean, the world in like, how many people are Catholic. So yeah, if you can really work with that grace and that starts with one person and goes to another, like I said, there's more Catholics than any other kinds of religion out there. So yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, over 1 billion people on fire
Millions,
from the
right?
Eucharist. Yeah, that would change everything.
Exactly, for sure. Um, and just on my experience too, is receiving the Eucharist, it's you're on fire after that, and you do feel anew, and you feel like your life is kind of revived when receiving the Eucharist. So it kind of touched on about Catholics and people who don't believe in the Eucharist is truly Jesus. So, I mean, it won't save us. So, what else will it do? I mean, if we don't listen to, if we don't know that this is fact and not fiction.
Mm-hmm. Well, St. Paul warns us in 1 Corinthians that if we approach the body without discernment, we bring condemnation onto ourselves.
Right.
So actually, it probably is harming people who are coming to the Eucharist because they're sinning if they are receiving the Eucharist without faith and if they're not in a state of grace, right? That is committing the sin of sacrilege.
Right.
So I would say that the biggest thing that we need to do to receive the Eucharist more fruitfully is to go to confession. If we can get Catholics to go to confession more regularly, to live in a state of grace, and to not only teach them about the Eucharist, which we need to do, right? I mean,
Right.
this is my body. I mean, Jesus said
Absolutely.
it very clearly, right? I mean, we really need to have that faith in the Lord's presence, but not just something that we hear, right? I think it has to be seen. How are people going to believe in the true presence if we treat Jesus in the Eucharist like a piece of bread?
Right.
That's part of the problem, is that we need to act like God is truly present before us when we come into the church.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I did not know it was a thing if you didn't have faith or anything until like a few years back. I'm like, that actually makes sense. That actually really does make sense. Um, and yeah, it's just being a faithful Catholic, going to confession regularly. I mean, I've been going every other week for now since kind of Lent starting and a little bit before that, and really has just really impacted on my life. I have known a couple of another guy who said, "Man, I didn't really go to confession before. I just kind of didn't really go, but I was still going to mass, but I didn't really go to confession." He's like, "Man, there's something about going to confession and then going to mass." He's like, "There's something about it that I just love about
Mhm.
it." And so so I just really encourage, like you said, people to go to confession and to receive the Eucharist as often as you can. I mean, especially if you have the faith and if you're in a state of grace. Um, this is kind of a time for a pop-up question, real quick, Doctor. And when you're saying like, we gotta show others, the way, I mean, we gotta treat Jesus like it's him, not just like it's bread. Could you just kind of give maybe an example of that? If someone's like
Mhm.
watching,
Mhm.
you know, us in the pew, as we receive Eucharist, how can we act like that's Jesus.
Yeah, I think even keeping the church as a place of sacred silence, to say that there is a
Sure.
presence, right? And, genuflecting reverently. Pope Benedict XVI recommended receiving communion kneeling and on the tongue, which was the common practice for most of the church's history. Because, just kind of walking up and standing and putting out your hands and then taking the host yourself and putting it in your mouth, the church permits that. So I'm not saying that's wrong,
Right.
but the church's tradition did recognize that there was greater reverence in kneeling down, because you're humbling yourself before the Eucharist and not touching the Eucharist as if it was a common piece of bread, right? But to eat it in a different kind of way. That really does make a difference. And just conducting our liturgies with kind of sacred reverence, transcendence, and with mystery and beauty. So even having a beautiful church, it says, well, there's something special about this place. God is here. And it looks like God is here because we really have made this a beautiful place to represent that presence, but also adoration. I mean, there's something really powerful about bringing people before Jesus present in adoration. And there's just such a great power there. I know people that said, I never believed in Jesus' true presence until I knelt down before him in adoration. And then I just knew, it just struck me at that moment. And so I think likewise, Eucharistic processions. If
Yeah.
we do throughout the year, those processions, and we're really manifesting Jesus in our community, I think that makes a big difference.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, it's really cool. I mean, you see people carry the cross on the road on Good Friday, and you have a Eucharist procession in town. I mean, it is really cool, and really adoration. It is. I mean, even if you don't, like people always say, if you're a first time going to adoration and you go and you don't fear anything at first, for the first time, go again because it's just being there and just really being open to Christ. That's what he really wants out of you, and he'll show you what he'll talk to you during that time. So great.
Absolutely.
I mean, yeah, great points on that. And I mean, I actually did a show, part of a show of like stuff, the beauty of Catholic churches. I believe it's episode 11. 10 reasons why I do not want to leave the Catholic faith. And Catholic churches were kind of top of my list, just because it's like this shows that yeah, God is truly present, and I mean it's the most beautiful cathedrals, basilicas anywhere. So definitely. So and also, correct me if I'm wrong, doctor, but going back to the receiving communion on the knees, on the tongue, not touching it. If, for example, let's say I walk up, receive it on my hands, kind of carelessly walk with my mouth to the sign of the cross, and there's still fragments left in my hands, um, that is kind of a serious thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and sometimes I even see people looking at their hands and picking up particles off of their hands, putting it in their mouth. And I think to myself, if you know that that's happening, well, maybe you should do something to make sure that doesn't happen, right? To
Right.
receive on the tongue. But unfortunately, a lot of people aren't paying attention to that. So if you do receive on the hands and you're going to continue to receive on the hands, please do pay attention to that and try to ensure that those particles aren't staying there. But yeah, that is part of the difficulty, and that's why the church did, even right now, communion on the tongue is the norm throughout the church in the world, and particular countries actually have to have an indult, a special permission to give the Eucharist on the hand, right? So that's not the norm, even though it's become the norm in our country and in other countries, of course.
Interesting. I did not know that, which kind of makes sense, but interesting. All right. So kind of getting back on the schedule. How can we bring this information and just really put more people on fire, about, going to confession, going to the Eucharist, believing, but most importantly, I mean, believing it's him and being in saved grace,
Mhm. Mhm.
during this, 2 or 3 years of Eucharist, revival that we are in right now.
Yeah. I think the answer to just about anything in the church right now is to form small communities.
Sure.
And so I would say that if you want people to come to church and to receive the sacraments, first gather them in your home. Maybe watch a Catholic movie together in your house, or start having a gathering of families Sunday afternoon. And then once you kind of get, maybe like a small group together, then read a Catholic book together, or watch a Catholic video series together and start talking about it. And I think that that is the way in which you might have an opportunity to say, hey, how everybody, not singling anybody out, how often do you
Sure.
guys go to confession? Hey, as a group, why don't we show up on Saturday afternoon? Like, we've been meeting as a group, on Sundays, and having this dinner together, whatever. Why don't we start going to confession together every so often? What do you guys think? If I go, will you go? Kind of,
Right.
I think that's how we have to start it. The way that we will be able to evangelize people and to grow in faith ourselves. It's not just I'm perfect and I'm going to help everybody else. No, I need to grow in my faith, and I know that other people need to grow in their faith. What's the best way to do that? We know what it is. It's to form strong community with other people. And in that context, we can grow in our faith together.
Awesome. Yeah, really great stuff. I mean, one, totally agree with that. One of the ways that we're kind of doing that is we just recently kind of we instated a men's group at church, and it was kind of shut down for a few years before COVID and stuff, and now we're picking it back up, and that is one of the challenges that we want to do. We gotta show up together, bring more men to church. We're trying to ask more men up to church,
Mhm.
and yeah, I totally agree. I mean, that's really what is a good idea.
Yeah, I
And
joined a fraternist group recently.
okay,
So it's more common, kind of like in the eastern United States, kind of in middle states there, but
yeah,
anybody can do it throughout the country. Fraternists, and it is a men's group, but it starts actually at age 11 and on up. And so fathers can come with their sons, but it's open to anyone. And so the fraternist group that I'm part of, we have older men, middle-aged, younger men with even without kids. And I have three of my own boys come with me, and it actually meets every single week.
really,
And we eat together, we do activities, play sports. We were just playing football last night. And then there's a talk, and then we break into small groups each week. And because I think it's every single week, I've noticed that I'm really actually getting to know the other men. And it's been a really positive thing. So I'd recommend people to look up fraternus.org, FRATERNUS, fraternus, and check it out, because that would be a good way to get kind of a men's ministry going in your parish.
yeah, definitely. Well, thank you for that. That's really, really, really nice. And I mean, just a little bit more on that, if you would. Just like, I mean, for people starting up that in their own parish and everything, like, or just inviting people out to the houses on the weekend. I mean, like, how, because you'll want to come across, especially if it's if it's non-Catholic, you want to come across as being the Catholic Church. We know it, it's the true faith, blah, blah, blah. You gotta kind of not, you just gotta bring it into them slowly. And for Catholics, again, if they're not really going to church, you gotta get to know them, bring them in slowly, and invite them out. So, like, how long do you guys meet for every week?
About a couple hours. Yeah,
Okay,
it's 6:30 to 8:30 every
sure.
single week. And I think that what they said, and I'm new to the group, but that it is the weekly commitment that really does, help you to really form those strong bonds. If it's like once a month or even every other week, then if you miss one, then it's like a whole month, right? Till you see the group again. And so the weekly cadence, I think, works well. And you can do things, if you're a parent, right, you could start like a small group for high schoolers, like in your house. Or this is what Focus does on college campuses, right? They start small groups that meet and they do Bible studies. But you see, moms at Catholic schools, getting together to pray and to read a book. And Fraternus is one example for men, but there's other groups. And I actually work for Exodus 90. And so we sponsor fraternities of, usually about six men who meet every week as well, right? And so they're going through our kind of our anchor program is the 90 days leading up to Easter, but we offer programming throughout the entire year for men to meet and to pray together and to grow in virtue. And of course, we have disciplines where we're praying every single day, making sacrifices and every day for those that we love. But you have to do it in fraternity. So I think that is a key element, right? So prayer, sacrifice, fraternity, learning about your faith, growing in your faith, like you combine all these things together and it's very powerful.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, just knowing about the faith, I mean, all that put together, like you said, I mean, just this past weekend, my pastor is like, if you keep learning about the faith, you go, I mean, you want to learn more about the faith, and you want to learn more about the faith, and you're like, you get frustrated because you're like, how did I not know this before? And if you do it together as a group, whether it's a men's group, women's group, whatever, or both of them, it's really you grow in faith with it, in faith, and it's really kind of exciting to do with each other. And like you said, like you are getting to know them better, so you just become closer to them, which basically that's what God calls us to do. So definitely. So basically we're kind of getting down there towards the end. So just going back on how the Eucharist, anything else that you said today about how can Eucharist save civilization? Any last remarks or anything you want to throw in there before the show ends?
Yeah, sure. So my new book, How the Eucharist Can Save Civilization, came out with TAN recently. So you can find that online, tanbooks.com, or you can go to Amazon or wherever else you get books. And the book has 3 sections. So the first one looks at it's the source. So where does the Eucharist come from? So looking at the whole vision of history, Old Testament, New Testament, the history of the church. The middle section is the summit. So it looks at the spirituality of the Mass, how we can enter more deeply into the Mass and our reception of communion, how it can be more fruitful. And the final section is the Christian life, right? So the source, the summit, the Christian life. And it's looking at ways in which we can live a Eucharistic way of life with the Eucharist at the very center, and how over time that really can change the world and can save civilization. Most of my books involve culture though. So the beer option is about how to build culture and evangelize through beer. Evangelizing humanity is kind of like a whole plan of the different elements of the evangelization of culture. Renewing Catholic schools is well what it claims to be, how to renew schools. And then the primacy of God is looking at the virtue of religion and how that orders our entire lives to God. So all my books are kind of working in that same direction. How do we order our lives and culture in the world to put God first?
Awesome. I do have to ask one question about your books, if I could, Doctor.
Yeah.
So let's say a new men's group. You listen to the episode, you you know, love what you're teaching. You want to buy a book and kind of learn together with that certain book. You want to buy all of them, but which one do you start with?
Well, so you asked about men and the men's group. So I would say, yeah, read the beer option,
Sure.
and then live it out like as a fraternity of men. Where gather together to drink moderately and kind of celebrating the faith, talking about the faith, and beer does help. I think gathering guys together and building friendship when consumed correctly, right, in
Not quite.
moderation, with virtue. So, yeah, I'd say that'd be a great place to start. But in general, right, we are in this Eucharistic revival, and so I think it was providential that the Eucharist book came out at this time. So, I mean, I would say, yeah, either one of those.
Oh, sure. Awesome. I just had to put you on the spot right there. So awesome. Yeah, so I'll have the links to your books down in the description box below where everyone no matter which platform we're on. You can scroll down and see them and click on the link, and it should bring you to the certain book on the link. So I'll put that in descriptions. Otherwise, Dr. Staudt, thank you again for what you do. I know looking at your bio, you're a traveling man. So I just want to thank you for what you do, doing God's will in the world. And like I said, I really enjoy listening to you on the radio show. I'm like, man, it's already, it's like the top of the hour. I haven't gotten really much done because I was listening to it. So it was so good. And thank you again for taking the time today to come on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me and for doing this podcast. And we're all just trying to do the Lord's will the best that we can. So let's pray for one another.
Absolutely. Amen to that. Like you said, no one's perfect. We can all improve. So that's for sure. So that is Dr. Jared Staudt, everyone. Go check him out. I'll have all the links, like I said, below in the description box. You can go check him out. And yeah, basically just kind of review. The Eucharist can save civilization if we truly believe it is, and if we are truly in a state of grace. And basically, like I said, it's a great way to kind of do research on, learn it in your parish, start a little community of people, keep growing, keep expanding, excuse me. And like Dr. Staudt said, I mean, if it can start with one, one or more, and just keep the whole world can change. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to be good witnesses and share the gospel. So if you have any questions, please feel free to drop in the comments below. I'll answer them, or I'll get Dr. Staudt to answer them. So I hope you enjoy the short one. We'll see you next week for episode 103, God willing. Right here, same time, same place at Catholic Table Talk Podcast. This is the podcast where everything Catholic is on the table.